What happens when a heartbroken woman has a one-night stand with a stranger and ends up pregnant with a royal heir? Sienna never expected to see him again, until fate brought him back into her life at the very moment she was giving birth. But what if the man who once disappeared now wants to marry her? This isn't just a love story. It's a story of second chances, secrets, and the kind of love that refuses to give up. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more unforgettable stories. Sienna Walker had never felt more beautiful. Her long auburn hair was curled softly, her burgundy dress hugged her curves just right, and the subtle shimmer on her eyelids caught the candlelight like stardust. Tonight was special. Her and Trent's second anniversary. She had spent hours getting ready, convinced that maybe this time he would prove all her doubts wrong. Maybe this time he'd show her love wasn't just about taking. It was about giving, too. When Trent pulled up in his sleek black Camaro and gestured for her to hop in, Sienna's heart fluttered. "You look stunning," he said with that signature smirk, brushing a hand along her bare shoulder. "Thanks," she replied softly, smiling despite the nagging voice in the back of her mind, warning her not to get her hopes up. But that hope dimmed the moment they pulled into the valet lane of the prestigious Lamarck Hotel downtown. "I thought we were going to Eden's Garden," she said, eyes flicking toward the hotel entrance. "You said you made reservations." "I did," Trent replied coolly, turning off the ignition. "But I figured we could celebrate somewhere a little more private." Something about his tone made her stomach twist. She forced a polite smile and followed him inside. At the front desk, Trent retrieved a room key like he'd done it 1,000 times before. They took the elevator to the 11th floor, and as the polished brass doors slid open with a soft chime, Sienna tried to swallow the lump rising in her throat. Maybe it's just a surprise. Maybe there's a reason. The room, however, offered no answers. No rose petals. No candles. No music. Just a plain hotel suite with a king-size bed and drawn curtains. "Where's the surprise?" she asked, turning to him as he shut the door behind them with a soft click. "You're looking at it," Trent said, walking toward her with a grin that now felt more like a threat. "Trent, what are you doing?" she asked, backing up slightly. "I'm giving us what we both wanted for 2 years." "No," Sienna said firmly, stepping away as he reached for her waist. "I've told you, I'm not ready for that." Trent scoffed. "It's been 2 years, Sienna. 2 years. You think I've waited all this time just for hugs and goodnight kisses?" Anger flashed in her eyes. "You said you respected me. Well, I'm done pretending I'm okay with your princess values. Everyone thinks I'm dating a nun." His words stung sharper than a slap. Before she could respond, he grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the bed. "Stop it," she yelled, trying to break free. "Lay!" But Trent was stronger. He pushed her onto the mattress, climbing over her. Panic surged through her as he gripped her wrists, kissing her neck roughly. "Trent, no! Get off me!" she screamed, writhing beneath him. And then, crack. Her palm connected with his cheek so hard that it echoed in the silent room. He reeled back, stunned, his expression twisting in shock. "You disgusting coward," Sienna seethed, breathing heavily as she scrambled off the bed and yanked her dress down. "Don't you ever touch me again, Sienna." "Wait," he began, voice suddenly sheepish. "I wasn't thinking." "No, you were. You were thinking exactly what you always think. About yourself." She stormed toward the door, trembling as she threw it open. "We're done, Trent. Forever. She didn't look back. The hotel lobby was too bright. Her heels clicked furiously across the marble floor, and the cold winter air outside bit into her skin the second she stepped out. But it didn't matter. Her heart ached more than her body did. She wandered aimlessly until she found herself standing in front of a dimly lit bar. A neon sign blinked lazily above the door. One Avenue? She hesitated, then pushed the door open. The music was low, the crowd sparse. Perfect. Maybe a drink would quiet the chaos swirling in her chest. She didn't realize it then, but the choice to step into that bar, right then, right there, would change the course of her life forever. The bar was dim, bathed in warm amber tones, and smelled faintly of aged whiskey and pinewood. Sienna slid onto the stool at the far end of the counter, as far from the few scattered patrons as she could get. She didn't want company. She wanted to forget. Her fingers trembled as she flagged the bartender, ordering the strongest tequila they had. The first shot went down like fire, searing her throat and her pride. By the time she reached the third, her heart no longer felt like it was clawing out of her chest. "Easy there," a voice said from beside her. It wasn't condescending, but calm, deep, and laced with something she couldn't quite name. "You keep going like that, you'll end up under the table." She turned her head slowly and blinked. The man next to her looked like he'd been plucked straight from a magazine. Dark hair in perfect disarray, sharp jawline, wearing a simple white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He had the kind of presence that demanded attention without trying. But what caught her off guard wasn't his looks. It was his eyes. There was something unreadable in them. A quiet storm. "Do I look like I need a babysitter?" Sienna muttered, attempting to focus through the blur. She waved to the bartender again. Another. The man raised a brow and leaned slightly toward her, just enough so she could smell his cologne. Something fresh and dangerously expensive. "Actually, yeah, you kinda do." She turned fully to him now, squinting.
"Are you my boyfriend or something?"
"Nope," he said with a slight smile. "But I could be." Sienna let out a dry, humorless laugh. "God, you're one of those guys." "No," he replied. "I'm just a guy who doesn't like seeing a beautiful woman drink herself into a blackout alone." Her snort was bitter. "That's rich." "Where are your friends?" he asked, his voice gentler now. "Clearly not here," she muttered. "And I don't need anyone." She stood abruptly, swaying, and tried to prove a point by walking in a straight line, but only made it 2 steps before her knees gave out. Before she hit the floor, strong arms caught her, steadying her. "Easy," he said, holding her up. "You're not proving anything except that gravity works." Sienna looked up at him, her face close to his chest. His heartbeat was steady, warm. A strange sense of safety wrapped around her. She pulled away hastily. "I'm fine," she insisted, even though she wasn't. "I'm taking you home," he said. "I don't have a home," she mumbled. "Not one I can go to." "Then, come to mine," he said, hesitating only briefly. "I'm not gonna leave you like this." She studied him through bleary eyes, trying to read his intentions. But she couldn't think straight. The tequila had dulled her instincts. "To your place," she repeated slowly. He nodded. "You'll be safe. I promise." She didn't know why she agreed. Maybe it was the emptiness inside her, or the softness in his voice, or the desperation to escape the ache in her chest. But before long, she was letting him help her into the elevator, his arm around her waist as she staggered. The ride-up was silent. The elevator dinged on the top floor, and when the doors opened, she found herself staring at a penthouse suite so luxurious it looked like a movie set. modern, sleek, and utterly quiet. He guided her to the plush bed, and she collapsed onto it, sinking into the blankets like a weightless feather. "You want something to eat?" he asked, crouching beside her. "Coffee?" She didn't answer. Her eyelids were heavy. "What do you want?" he asked again, softer. Sienna turned to him, her voice slow and slurred. "I want you." He froze. Her eyes barely open, she added, "You're handsome." "I think—" He chuckled under his breath. "I've been called worse." Then she kissed him. It was sudden, soft, and laced with confusion, but something about it ignited a spark neither of them expected. In her drunken haze, she reached for him like she was grasping at something real, something that wouldn't vanish like all the promises before. And just like that, everything changed. Sienna stared at the white plastic stick in her hand, willing the second line to disappear. But it stayed, bold, undeniable, and unforgiving. Positive. "No," she whispered, shaking her head, as if that would somehow change the result. "This can't be happening." But it was. She sank onto the cool tile floor of Haley's bathroom, her knees folding beneath her, and tried to slow her breathing. Her mind spun in 100 directions, each more overwhelming than the last. The night at the bar, the stranger with the unreadable eyes, the bed she woke up alone in. No name, no phone number, no goodbye. Just a dim memory of soft kisses and an ache she couldn't explain. She hadn't even thought it was possible. It had been a single night, a moment of weakness, one decision fueled by heartbreak and tequila. But now, staring at that tiny pink line, the consequences of that moment stared back. Haley's knock came softly on the bathroom door. "You okay in there, Si?" Sienna couldn't find her voice. She opened the door slowly, holding the test in one trembling hand. Haley's eyes widened. "Oh my God. Is that?" Sienna nodded. "I'm pregnant." There was a long beat of silence. Then Haley pulled her into a tight, protective hug. "We're gonna figure this out. I've got you." Sienna clung to her best friend like a life raft. The next few days were a blur. Sienna tried to work up the courage to tell her parents, but when she did, it didn't go well. Her mother had gone stiff with disappointment, her father's face flushed with rage. "You mean to tell me Dale Walker had growled that you don't even know who the father is?" I didn't get his name," Sienna confessed, her voice small. "You're no daughter of mine," he snapped. "Not until you fix this mess." Christine didn't say a word. She just turned her back and walked away. Sienna stood in their living room, stunned. She had expected anger, but not exile. Not abandonment. She left that night and moved into Haley's spare bedroom permanently. Haley, ever the fierce protector, didn't even hesitate. "You'll stay with me. Forget them. You and this baby are all that matter now." Sienna began working from her laptop, freelancing where she could. Her once glamorous life as a flight attendant, just a memory. The nausea came in waves. So did the loneliness. But every time she felt a flutter inside her belly, she reminded herself why she was doing this. She tried to find the man from that night, returned to the bar a few weeks later, only to find it shuttered. A chalkboard sign out front read "permanently closed." No forwarding address, no contact info, nothing. Like he'd vanished. She sometimes wondered if he was real at all. Was it better that way? Would he even want to know? Would he believe her? At night, she stared at the ceiling, whispering to the tiny life inside her. "I'm scared," she'd confess, "but I promise I'll protect you, no matter what." As the months passed, Her belly grew round and firm. Her body changed. Her back ached, her feet swelled. But her resolve hardened. She didn't need anyone else. Not Trent, not her parents, not the man with the smirk and the midnight eyes. She would raise this baby herself. She would be enough. She had to be. It was early October when Sienna found herself waddling down the front porch steps of Haley's townhouse, one hand braced on her lower back, the other gripping a small tote bag stuffed with prenatal vitamins and an ultrasound printout. The morning was brisk, the air crisp with the first true signs of fall, and every movement now felt like a Herculean task. She was 38 weeks pregnant, and it showed. Her belly curved like a perfectly ripened watermelon beneath her maternity dress. Her ankles had all but vanished, and tying her own shoes had become laughably impossible. Haley had offered to take her to her weekly checkup, as always, but her boss had called her in for an emergency office meeting. "It's okay," Sienna had insisted, waving her off. "The clinic's just a 10-minute cab ride. I can manage." Now, stepping onto the sidewalk, she was beginning to second-guess that confidence. Halfway through the ride, a sharp cramp shot through her abdomen, pulling a surprised gasp from her lips. She gripped the edge of the seat and closed her eyes, breathing slowly as she'd been taught in her prenatal classes. Just a Braxton Hicks contraction, she told herself. False labor. Nothing to panic about. But when another cramp hit, stronger and lower, followed by a slow, unmistakable gush of fluid soaking through her leggings, panic was no longer optional. "Oh no," she whispered, eyes wide. "Ma'am?" the cab driver asked, peering at her through the rearview mirror. I think my water just broke." Sienna stammered, gripping the handle beside her, as another wave of pain crashed through her. "Okay, hospital it is," the driver exclaimed, making a sharp U-turn and speeding down the nearest avenue. Sienna pressed her back into the seat and groaned through another contraction. The world outside blurred. Every red light felt like an eternity. The pain was intensifying now. Rhythmic. Undeniable. She fumbled through her phone with shaking fingers and tried to call Haley. No answer. A few more numbers scrolled by, but none of them mattered. She had no partner to call. No parents to rely on. She was alone. "Just get me there," she murmured to the driver. "Please." Then, the cab jerked to a halt. Not at the hospital, but at a red light in the middle of traffic. A loud honk blared from behind them. And then, as if the universe had decided she needed one more obstacle, her door flung open. "Are you okay?" a voice called out. Sienna blinked up, dazed and in pain, her eyes landing on a tall man in a charcoal suit, his expression alarmed. "I'm in labor," she gasped. "Help me, please." He didn't hesitate. "Let's go. My car's across the street." Before she could process what was happening, he had scooped her carefully from the cab and was rushing her through a crosswalk, ignoring the irritated drivers honking all around them. Sienna clung to his shoulders, groaning as another contraction hit. I can't make it." "You will," the man said calmly, urgency laced in his voice. "Just hold on." He helped her into the back seat of a sleek black Mercedes parked near the curb. The second she was buckled in, he slammed the door and climbed into the front, dialing the nearest hospital on his dashboard screen. As he sped through traffic, weaving with skilled precision, he stole glances at her through the mirror. Sienna's face was contorted in pain, sweat beading on her forehead. She was panting, muttering under her breath. Then she said something that made his grip on the wheel falter. "Please, don't leave me." His heart clenched. The voice, the eyes, the shape of her face. He turned and met her gaze. And in that single, Suspended moment. Luca Donovan realized exactly who she was. Luca's hands tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles going white as he stole another glance at her through the rearview mirror. Her face was paler now, glistening with sweat, her hands gripping the headrest in front of her as she fought through another wave of agony. But he couldn't tear his eyes away. The curve of her lips, the way her eyes squinted with each contraction, the sound of her voice, that voice. It was her. The woman he had never stopped thinking about. The woman who had vanished from his bed nearly 9 months ago, leaving behind nothing but a half-folded blanket and the scent of wild roses on his pillow. He had searched for her in the weeks after, returning to the bar, asking around, even pulling footage from the building's security cameras. But there had been no name, no number, just that night. Just her. He had convinced himself it was for the best. That maybe she hadn't wanted to be found. That maybe, like him, it had been a moment of reckless escape. A one-night surrender to whatever fire had drawn them together. But now she was here, in the back seat of his car, in labor, and very, very pregnant. His heart pounded as he took a sharp left toward St. Elizabeth's Hospital. The air conditioning blasted against his flushed skin, but it didn't help. A bead of sweat slid down his temple. Still, far. Her voice came, strained and trembling. Almost there, just a few more minutes, he said, though even his voice sounded foreign to his ears. Feels like forever, she groaned, her face contorting again. He checked the GPs. 6 minutes. That's when the question slipped out, too heavy to keep inside. You shouldn't be out here alone, he said, trying to sound casual. Where's your husband? I don't have one, she muttered, her voice barely audible. Something sharp and unnameable sliced through Luca's chest. He wasn't sure if it was guilt or hope, or both. He cleared his throat, glancing at her in the mirror again. She didn't answer right away, breathing through her next contraction like a warrior. Finally, she rasped, Sienna. Sienna Walker. He exhaled slowly. So that's your name. Hang on, Sienna, he said gently. We're almost there. When they pulled into the hospital's emergency bay, nurses rushed out with a wheelchair. Luca parked quickly and ran to help, but Sienna's hand clutched his wrist before the nurse could take over. Don't leave me, she said, her eyes locking with his. He froze. Please, she added, softer now, vulnerable. Luca nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat.
I won't.
They wheeled her in, and he followed close behind until a nurse held up her hand to stop him at the delivery room doors. This is as far as you go, sir. He started to explain. He wasn't her husband, wasn't even supposed to be here. But Sienna looked back at him one last time. Please wait, she said, before they took her inside. And he did. Luca paced the hallway like a man possessed, every passing second loud in his ears. His mind spun in circles. About her, about the baby, about that night that had never truly ended for him. He didn't know what this meant, what would come next, but he knew one thing with certainty. Sienna Walker had come back into his life like a storm. And this time, he wasn't letting her go. The waiting room was too quiet. Luca sat stiffly in the molded plastic chair, elbows on his knees, fingers interlocked, bouncing restlessly as the ticking of the wall clock echoed like thunder. He wasn't sure how long he'd been there. 40 minutes. An hour. Time blurred. When your chest was knotted and your brain couldn't slow down. What was he doing here? He wasn't the father, was he? The math added up, disturbingly well. The timing. The way she looked at him. The fact that she had clung to his arm like he was the only person in the world she trusted. Her voice, those 3 words, "Don't leave me." He didn't want to. Then came the sound of soft footsteps. A nurse appeared, her scrubs patterned with cartoon giraffes and a surgical mask hanging loosely around her neck.
Sir, she called, scanning the waiting area.
Luca stood instantly. "Congratulations," she said with a warm smile. "Your wife just gave birth to a healthy baby girl." Oh, no, I'm not her," Luca started. But the nurse was already waving for him to follow. "This way, please. She's in recovery now, but you can see the baby." Too stunned to protest, he trailed behind her through the pristine white halls, past rows of glass windows and muffled cries. The maternity ward smelled of antiseptic and new beginnings. "Here we are," the nurse said, motioning toward the nursery. Another nurse emerged, this one cradling a tiny pink bundle. "Would you like to hold your daughter?" she asked, already extending the child toward him. Luca's heart leapt into his throat. I don't know if I should," but it was too late. The newborn was already in his arms, impossibly small and warm and real. Her little face was round and delicate, her mouth forming a perfect O as she yawned. Her fingers curled reflexively around his pinky. And just like that, something inside Luca cracked wide open. He'd never felt anything like it, not in all the boardrooms or luxury cars or fleeting nights with women whose names he barely remembered. This was different, pure, earth shattering. His eyes burned. "She's beautiful," the nurse whispered. Luca couldn't speak. He just nodded, staring down at the tiny human who might be his daughter. He didn't want to give her back. 2 days later, Sienna was discharged. Haley had rushed to the hospital once she found out and helped get them home. Sienna barely spoke on the ride back, exhausted and overwhelmed. But there was something else under her silence. Something Luca couldn't quite name. She glanced at him only once, when he gently handed her the baby at discharge and muttered a quiet "thank you" for everything. He had nodded, not trusting himself to say anything else. The hospital bill had come up unexpectedly as they were leaving. Sienna had looked panicked, fumbling through her paperwork, but before she could say a word, Luca had stepped in and paid the entire balance. Wilka had stepped in and paid the entire balance. Nearly $50,000. Haley had been floored. "Are you serious? You just met her. You don't even know if you're the father," she whispered later that night when Sienna was resting. Luca had simply replied, "I know enough." Now, sitting alone in his penthouse apartment again, Luca stared at the receipt tucked in his wallet. He wasn't trying to buy his way in. That wasn't what this was about. It was about the baby. About Sienna. About the night that had never left his mind. He couldn't explain it, but he didn't want to walk away. Not this time. The sun was just beginning to dip below the horizon when Sienna stepped out of the pediatric clinic, baby Amelie nestled peacefully in her stroller. The checkup had gone well. The doctor said her daughter was thriving, healthy, already strong for a newborn. That alone should have lifted her mood. But her thoughts were elsewhere. Clutched in her hand was a small, folded slip of paper. It held a name and an address, Luca Donovan. The nurse who'd attended her after delivery had slipped it to her, whispering that he was the one who paid the hospital bill in full. Sienna had tried not to let her jaw drop at the number, $50,000. She'd nearly fainted just reading it. That kind of generosity didn't come from strangers, not without reason. And deep down, she knew exactly why. Amelie stirred gently as Sienna wheeled her along the sidewalk toward the building printed on the note. It was on her way home, and she couldn't pretend she didn't want answers. She didn't like owing anyone, especially not a man she barely knew. The street was quiet, upscale, with sleek architecture and manicured landscaping. But as she rounded a corner and spotted the sign above a familiar building, her breath caught. 1 Avenue. Her heart skipped. This was it, the bar, the place where her life had changed in a single night, the same building where she'd woken up with only a dull headache, tangled sheets, and no memory of the man who had touched her so gently and disappeared so completely. Her gaze lifted to the penthouse windows above. It was his home. Fingers trembling, she entered the building and showed the address to the front desk security guard. "Yes, Mom. Mr. Donovan's penthouse is on the top floor," he said, eyeing the baby stroller with faint curiosity. "You can take the elevator straight up." She nodded, her throat too dry to respond. As she rode the elevator, her heart pounded louder with each passing floor. What was she doing? What would she say? When the elevator doors opened, she stepped into a quiet corridor with only one door at the end. Large, polished. Intimidating, she walked slowly toward it, nerves unraveling. A tall ceramic vase stood in the corner. She vaguely remembered bumping into it on her way out that morning so many months ago. A strange wave of déjà vu hit her. Before she could raise her hand to knock, the door swung open. Luca stood there, a tie half looped around his neck, hair damp like he'd just showered, and a look of complete astonishment on his face. "You," he said, almost breathless. Her own voice cracked as she spoke. "You're the guy from that night. You're—" They stared at each other in stunned silence until Sienna's emotions boiled over. "You're a liar!" she hissed, suddenly swatting his chest with the flat of her hand.
You disappeared. You left me alone. You knew I was drunk.
Luca grabbed her wrists gently, eyes locked on hers. "Sienna, stop. I didn't know. I had no idea you were pregnant. I didn't even know your name until the hospital." "You took advantage of me," she snapped, tears pricking her eyes. "No," Luca said firmly. "That night, you looked at me and said I could have you, completely. You kissed me. You pulled me in. I thought we both wanted it." She yanked her hands away, chest heaving. Well, it was a mistake. He glanced down at the baby in the stroller. "So, she's a mistake too?" "No," Sienna barked, voice cracking. "She's the best thing that ever happened to me." Luca's voice softened.
"Then let me be her father."
She stared at him, stunned. "I want to be in her life," he said, stepping closer. "And yours, if you'll let me." Sienna swallowed hard, her world spinning once again. She hadn't expected him to say that. And she definitely hadn't expected that, for the first time in months, a tiny piece of her broken heart would start to hope again. Luca didn't wait. The moment the words left his mouth, "Let me be her father," he knew there was no taking them back. But he didn't want to, not when Sienna's lips parted in stunned silence, her eyes welling with something he couldn't quite name. She looked like she was caught between disbelief and the desperate need to protect herself. He understood. He'd broken her trust the moment he disappeared, even if unintentionally. "Look," he continued, his voice lower now, gentler, "I'm not asking you to forgive everything right this second. I want to make things right, for her. For you." Sienna crossed her arms, her jaw tight. "You think marrying me will fix it?" Luca blinked. "What?" "You're not exactly subtle," she said, eyes narrowing. You want to play dad now? What's next? A proposal out of guilt? He stepped forward slowly, as if approaching a wounded animal. Not guilt. Responsibility. And she laughed once, short and dry. That's rich. You don't know me, Luca. We spent one night together, and most of it I barely remember. Now you want to be my daughter's father, and what do you want to be my daughter's father, and move in? No, he said calmly. I want to marry you. The silence that followed was deafening. Sienna blinked rapidly. You're insane. Maybe, Luca admitted, a slight smile tugging at his lips. But I'm serious. I haven't stopped thinking about you since that night. When I found you again, when I saw Amelie, I knew I had to try. Try what? You're a stranger to me. Then let's fix that. Let me earn your trust. Let me be there every day. Let me be the man who raises her with you. No more vanishing, no more what, ifs, just us. And her. Sienna was shaking her head, but her expression had softened. Her defenses weren't down, but they were wavering. You're offering marriage like it's a handshake. Luca chuckled. Marriage only gets complicated when there are secrets or lies. I'm putting everything on the table. Sienna rubbed her temple, sighing. This wasn't supposed to happen. I just wanted to return your money, say thank you, and walk away. You still can, he said quietly. But I hope you don't. Her eyes met his again. That steadiness in his gaze, calm, resolute, was unexpected. It wasn't the cocky flirt from the bar that night. It was a man who had made a choice. I'll think about it, she whispered. Luca smiled gently. That's all I ask. The next day, he showed up at her place with a stroller, boxes of diapers, and a basket full of baby clothes. Haley answered the door and nearly dropped her coffee. Well, look who's decided to become super dad. Luca grinned, just trying to make a good impression. Sienna stepped out from the hallway, baby Amelie in her arms. She looked tired, unsure, but there was something softer in her eyes now. Less resistance, more curiosity. You don't give up, do you? She asked. Not when it matters. Later that evening, he took them both to dinner. A quiet steakhouse. Candlelight flickering between them. Amelie dozing in her carrier beside the table. Sienna ordered with a hunger she hadn't shown in weeks, and Luca watched her with a kind of reverence that made her cheeks warm. Tell me about you, he asked halfway through the meal. What would you like to know? Everything. She rolled her eyes, but smiled anyway. For the first time in a long time, something in her heart stirred. Not just hope, but something dangerously close to wanting to believe in love again. It took Sienna a full week to come to a decision. Every night, after putting Amelie to sleep, she would lie awake replaying Luca's words. His offer of marriage hung in her mind like a song she couldn't get out of her head. It sounded ridiculous, too fast, even foolish. But what haunted her most wasn't his boldness. It was his sincerity. He meant every word. She hadn't planned to say yes. Yet there she was, standing beside him in a courthouse garden, a delicate cream dress hugging her still healing figure, with Haley on her left holding Amelie and a silver. Haley on her left holding Amelie and a silver, hired judge standing in front of them, reading out the vows. Luca looked every bit the man she remembered from that night. Sleek suit, sharp jaw, but with a softness in his eyes she'd never seen before. He wasn't just present. He was grounded, solid, like a man who wasn't running anymore. You may kiss the bride, the judge finally said, smiling kindly. Sienna turned slowly to face him, her heart hammering. Luca leaned forward gently, asking with his eyes before pressing the softest kiss to her lips. It was quick, tender, and respectful, but it lit something in her chest she couldn't quite name. After the ceremony, they went straight to her parents' home. Luca insisted. He said it was time she had her family back, and if they wouldn't listen to her, they'd listen to her, they'd listen to him. She hadn't seen her father since the day he told her she was no longer his daughter. Her stomach twisted at the thought of facing him again, but Luca squeezed her hand as they approached the modest front porch. "Let me talk first," he whispered. When her father opened the door, his face froze. "Mr. Walker," Luca said, his voice calm and clear. "My name is Luca Donovan. I'm here to ask for your daughter's hand. I know I should have come sooner, and I take full responsibility for everything, but I'm here now. I love your daughter, and I love your daughter, and I love your daughter. I intend to spend the rest of my life proving that to both of them." Dale's jaw clenched. "It's a little late for asking, isn't it?" "Maybe," Lucas said, then did something that stunned everyone. He got down on one knee. Christine gasped softly. Sienna's breath caught. "I don't care what you think of me," he said, looking Dale directly in the eye, "but I want Sienna to have her family back. I want our daughter to grow up knowing she's loved, not just by us, but by her grandparents, too." Dale didn't speak for a long time. Then, without warning, he stepped aside. "Come in." Sienna blinked in disbelief. Christine wiped a tear as she stepped forward and touched her daughter's cheek gently. Inside, the house smelled of rosemary and warm bread. Haley followed with Amelie, who immediately became the center of attention. Dale didn't say much, but his eyes never left the baby. At one point, Sienna saw him smile, just a flicker, but it was there. Later that evening, back at their new shared apartment, Sienna asked Luca, "Why did you really want to marry me? Was it just for Amelie?" He shook his head. "I wanted to marry you before I even knew she existed." "You didn't even know my name," she challenged, though there was no real bite in her voice. "No," he admitted, "but I remembered your eyes. That was enough." And for the first time in what felt like forever, Sienna allowed herself to lean into his touch without fear. Maybe this wasn't the fairy tale she had imagined. But maybe, just maybe, it could be something better. Something real. The morning light spilled through the curtains in soft golden streaks as Sienna stirred in bed, the scent of brewing coffee drifting from the kitchen. She blinked her eyes open slowly, adjusting to the quiet warmth of their new apartment. Amelie's bassinet stood beside the bed, and the soft coos of their daughter were the first sounds she heard. She sat up carefully, her body still healing but lighter than it had felt in months, emotionally more than physically. She wasn't alone anymore. Luca padded into the room barefoot, holding a mug in one hand and a baby bottle in the other. He wore a fitted gray t-shirt and plaid pajama pants, his dark hair messily tousled from sleep. He looked like someone who belonged, here with her. "I heated the bottle," he said, offering it to her with a smile. Sienna took it, their fingers brushing. "Thanks." He leaned over the bassinet and whispered, "Morning, little love," before gently kissing Amelie's forehead. The sight of him with their daughter still made her heart flutter in ways she didn't understand. Later that day, while Amelie napped and Sienna folded laundry in the living room, she noticed Luca pacing with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in hushed tones. Something about his posture was tense, tight. When the call ended, he turned to her with a look she couldn't read. "Everything okay?" she asked, setting a onesie aside. He hesitated, then sat down beside her. That was my assistant, Greg. He's been covering for me while I've been away from work. She nodded slowly. Right. Your company. What do you do again? Luca chuckled lightly. Manage a few things. But the truth is, I'm also heir to a family business overseas, a big one. My parents are kind of, well, known. Sienna raised an eyebrow. How well known are we talking? He exhaled. Royal well known. She blinked. Come again? My parents are the king and queen of Elvona. I'm their only son. Which technically makes me the crown prince. For a moment, she just stared. Then she burst into a laugh she couldn't contain. You're kidding. I wish I was, he replied, smiling sheepishly. I walked away from it a few years ago. I wanted to live on my own terms, away from politics, obligations, all of it. I opened the bar, started my own ventures. And then I met you. Sienna's laugh slowly faded. So, I married a prince. He nodded. But I didn't want you to marry a prince. I wanted you to marry me. And your parents? She asked, unsure whether to feel flattered or overwhelmed. They weren't thrilled when they found out, he admitted. My father in particular. But my mother. She's excited to meet you and Amelie. So, they know about us. They do now, and they want to fly in. Soon. Sienna swallowed. Wow, I didn't see that coming. I know it's a lot, but I don't want to hide you or Amelie. Not from them. Not from anyone. You're my family now. There was something so sincere in the way he said family, their eyes burned with unexpected tears. I'm not what they'd expect, she said quietly. I'm not royal. I'm not even from a fancy family. I'm just me. And that's exactly who I fell for, Luca said, reaching out to gently touch her cheek. You. Strong, stubborn, beautiful you. Sienna looked at him for a long moment, then smiled through the emotion threatening to spill over. Okay, Prince Donovan. Let's meet the Royal Inn, Laws. And in her heart she knew, whatever came next, she wasn't facing it alone. The grand estate of Elvona shimmered beneath the afternoon sun, its white stone towers rising proudly against the clear blue sky. As the car rolled to a stop in front of the palace gates, Sienna sat frozen in the back seat, Amelie asleep in her car seat beside her, and Luca gently rubbing her hand. She had imagined this moment for weeks, ever since Luca told her who he really was. Still, no amount of imagining could prepare her for this. An actual palace, guards in uniform, and rows of marble steps leading to towering golden doors. You still have time to run, Luca joked, flashing a nervous smile. Sienna let out a shaky laugh, her stomach tied in knots. Tempting. They're going to love you, he said, squeezing her hand. They just need a minute to adjust. I'm not worried about your mom, she replied, peering through the window. It's your dad who looks like he could stare a hole through someone's soul. Luca's grin widened. That's just his face. A guard opened the door and helped her out. As she stepped onto the marble path, the grandeur of the palace hit her all over again. She picked up Amelie's carrier and adjusted her posture, trying not to look like someone who had been wiping spit up off her shirt 2 hours ago. Waiting at the top of the stairs were Luca's parents, King Alaric and Queen Morella. The queen descended first, a vision of elegance in a pale blue dress, her smile warm and welcoming. Sienna, she said, her voice melodic and gentle. Welcome, my dear. Before Sienna could react, the queen had enveloped her in a hug. I've been waiting to meet you and my granddaughter, she whispered, her eyes shimmering with emotion as she pulled away and peered into Ameli's carrier. "She's perfect." "Thank you, Your Majesty," Sienna said, voice barely above a whisper. "Call me Morella, please. We're family now." Behind her, King Alaric remained stoic, his expression unreadable. He approached slowly, hands clasped behind his back, examining Sienna with a gaze that felt more like an assessment than a greeting. "She's small," he muttered, glancing down at Amelie. "She's 2 months old," Luca replied dryly. The king's eyes moved to Sienna. "You're not what I expected." "Neither was your son," Sienna said, before she could stop herself. A long, tense silence followed. Mirella looked horrified, Luca looked like he was trying not to laugh, and Sienna wanted to dig a hole in the marble and disappear. But then, to her complete shock, Alaric let out a low chuckle. "Well," he said, "at least you're honest." Mirella looped her arm through her husband's. "Come now, let's not scare the poor girl. They've had a long trip." Inside the palace, everything sparkled. Golden chandeliers, towering columns, walls adorned with portraits of Elvona's ancestors. Sienna felt like she had walked into a fairy tale, only she wasn't the princess. She was the unexpected guest at the ball. Over the next few days, the Wilfords stayed in the royal residence, settling into guest quarters that were larger than Sienna's entire apartment back home. Amelie was doted on by the Queen daily, and even King Alaric seemed to soften when he held his granddaughter for the first time, his hard eyes misting over ever so slightly. Despite the whirlwind, Sienna found herself adjusting. She began to see glimpses of the real people behind the titles. Morella's love for her son. Alaric's quiet protectiveness. The servants' kindness. The way they adored Amelie. It wasn't just a royal family. It was a family. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe she could belong. One evening, as she stood by the palace balcony, watching the stars twinkle over Elvona's gardens, Luca came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "Still nervous," he murmured. She leaned into him, smiling. "No, just..." "At what? "That this is my life now," she whispered, "and that I don't want to run away from it." The holidays arrived in a blur of glittering lights, laughter, and the scent of cinnamon drifting through the grand halls of Elvona's royal palace. Sienna couldn't quite believe this was her life now, dressed in velvet and silk, chasing after a crawling Amelie who had just discovered how to tug on the royal drapes, while Queen Morella cooed lovingly nearby and King Alaric begrudgingly allowed the toddler to gnaw on his finger, like a chew to gnaw on his finger, like a chew tea. The old king might still wear his usual scowl, but no one could miss the way he beamed every time his granddaughter giggled. Sienna's parents had flown in from the States for the first time, and though their eyes had nearly popped out of their heads when they stepped off the royal jet, they were quickly swept into the warmth of the Wilford family's hospitality. Her father, Dale, exchanged stiff nods with King Alaric before they somehow ended up in the garden sipping whiskey and talking about carpentry. Her mother, Christine, spent hours chatting with Morella in a mix of polite awe and maternal pride. It was surreal, but it felt right. Even Haley had joined the festivities, much to Luca's amusement. She strutted through the palace like she owned the place, flirting shamelessly with one of the royal guards and snapping selfies beside the golden staircases. "Girl," she whispered to Sienna at one point, "I'm starting to think your baby has royal cheekbones." The Christmas tree was enormous, taller than any Sienna had ever seen, with hundreds of ornaments in red, gold, and silver. Beneath it, boxes upon boxes of gifts were piled high, each tagged in elaborate calligraphy. But the greatest gift came when Sienna handed Luca a small red box and told him to open it last. He raised an eyebrow. "This better not be a tie. You know I have a whole drawer full." "Just open it," she said, trying and failing to hide her grin. Everyone watched as he peeled back the paper and opened the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a pregnancy test. Positive. Beside it was a black and white ultrasound photo, barely the size of a credit card, but clear enough to show the tiny bean-sized shape of their next child. Lucas stared at it, stunned, before looking up at her. "You're serious," he whispered. She nodded. "Baby number 2. Surprise." His laughter burst out of him in disbelief and pure joy. He stood, lifted her off the ground, and spun her in a circle, while everyone around them clapped and cheered. A few months later, that single pregnancy turned out to be a double blessing, twin girls. The palace erupted in celebration. Morella wept openly. Alaric actually danced a little jig, though he denied it later. Amelie took on her role as big sister with curious delight, often toddling over to peer into the bassinets and poke her sister's cheeks with gentle fascination. Late one night, as the babies slept and Amelie Doe's curled between them on the oversized bed, Luca pulled Sienna into his arms. They lay together in comfortable silence, her head resting on his chest, the steady beat of his heart grounding her. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked quietly. "The first one," he murmured, brushing her hair back from her face. She nodded. "All the time," he whispered. "It changed everything." "I used to think it was a mistake," she admitted. "But now—" He kissed her forehead. "It brought me to you." Sienna smiled, her eyes fluttering shut. Her journey hadn't started like a fairy tale. But somehow, against all odds, it had become one. And this time, it wasn't magic or crowns or royal blood that made it so. It was love. The kind that stayed. Life lesson from the story. This story is a powerful reminder that life doesn't always unfold according to plan. But sometimes, the most unexpected moments lead us to exactly where we're meant to be. Sienna thought one night of weakness defined her, that her value had diminished because she made a choice clouded by pain. But through that difficult journey, through heartbreak, single motherhood, rejection, and uncertainty, she discovered her strength, her voice, and ultimately, a love that saw her for all that she was. Luca's transformation teaches us that true responsibility isn't born out of obligation, but out of choice. He chose to stay, to step up, to love not just the child, but the woman who brought that child into the world, not because it was easy or expected, but because it was right. Together, they show us that love isn't always perfect or predictable. It's messy, it takes courage, forgiveness, and sometimes it begins in the most imperfect way. But with effort, honesty, and commitment, love can heal, build, and last. Most importantly, this story reminds us that our past doesn't define our worth. It's how we rise from it, how we love through it, that truly shapes our future. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you feel something, tell us in the comments. Where are you watching from? And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another heartfelt story like this. More powerful tales are coming your way. Stories of resilience, love, redemption, and the kind of hope we all need a little more of. Thanks for being here. We'll see you in the next one.